Hello and welcome to the Cash News Podcast, your go-to source for informative conversations about all things cash and currency. From cash security and payments technology to the cash supply chain, we're here to share insights on the issues shaping the world of cash today. Join your hosts, Tom Meehan, Sean Ferrari, and Brad Moody as they dive into the latest trends, strategies, and technology. This is the Cash News Podcast. Now, here's Tom, Sean, and Brad.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling something really central, I think, to how our economy works now. It's this paradox. We're all about digital everything, right? Instant payments, tap and go. It's all super convenient. But at the very same time, you've got governments, activists, fighting hard to keep physical cash, paper money, not just alive, but actually mandatory in some cases. Why is that happening?
It's a great question, and it's a really timely tension. Our sources today draw this unexpected but absolutely critical link. We're not just talking about cash because of nostalgia or, the good old days.
Right.
We're looking at some hard data, actual numbers that show just how fragile our global digital systems really are. That massive AWS outage recently, that's a perfect, terrifying example.
Okay.
And we're putting that right alongside policy debates happening now in places like New Zealand, the US, where they're specifically trying to preserve cash.
For reasons beyond just backup.
Exactly. For economic freedom, for making sure everyone's included, and for basic systemic resilience. When the digital stuff breaks, you need something else.
So that's our mission today. We're going to dig into the specifics, the data points that really explain this push. It's like this battle, the incredible speed and, let's face it, efficiency of the cloud versus the simple, solid certainty of having a $20 bill in your hand. Why should you, listening now, tapping your phone for coffee, streaming this, why should you care if cash disappears? Well, the argument we're exploring is that keeping cash isn't just nice to have. It's maybe essential for freedom, for fairness, and just for keeping things working when inevitably the digital world hiccups or, completely crashes.
Right. We're going to unpack that true cost, that staggering cost of what happens when our digital world proves fragile.
Okay. So to really get why people are fighting for physical cash, we first have to understand the potential downside of relying only on digital. And that takes us straight to the big one, the event that basically became the poster child for digital fragility.
You're talking about the Amazon Web Services outage. AWS, October 20th, 2025.
Exactly. Our sources were pretty blunt about it. They said it brought the internet to its knees. That's quite a statement.
It really did. And you have to understand the scale here. This wasn't just, your favorite website being slow for an hour.
Right.
The problem started in a very specific, very critical place. The U.S. East 1 data cluster. It's in Northern Virginia.
And why is that location such a big deal?
Because US East 1 isn't just any old server farm. It's AWS's oldest, it's their biggest, and it's probably the most heavily used region they have globally.
So it's like the cornerstone of their entire cloud operation.
In many ways, yes, it's foundational. So when that region has a serious problem, the ripples spread everywhere, instantly, across continents.
Okay, so what actually caused this internet kneecapping event? Was it some kind of massive cyber attack, state-sponsored hacking?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But no. And this is what's almost more frightening, in a way. It was an internal technical glitch, really mundane, actually.
Mundane.
It was a failure inside a subsystem, a piece of software whose job was basically to monitor the health of other parts specifically, network load balancers within their main computing service, EC2.
So the thing designed to watch for problems broke.
Exactly. And that failure set off a devastating chain reaction. Let's slow down here because this really shows the fragility.
Okay.
The monitoring system fails. That immediately triggers massive failures in DNS resolution. DNS, domain name system. Think of it like the internet's phone book.
Right. It translates website names, like Amazon.com, into the numerical IP addresses computers actually use to connect.
Precisely. So when the DNS resolution started failing because of this initial glitch, it was like the phone book suddenly had millions of wrong numbers or missing entries. Your computer might have a perfect internet connection, but it literally couldn't find the address for the service it was trying to reach.
Everything's there, but you can't find the path to it.
You got it. And here's where that concentration risk becomes systemic. This DNS failure specifically broke the connection to the API for DynamoDB.
DynamoDB.
Yeah.
That's a big AWS database service, right? Non-relational cloud database.
A huge one. And our sources found that this single database service, DynamoDB, is the foundation for more than 100 other critical AWS services.
Wow. 100 services dependent on that one database API, which went down because of a DNS problem, which stemmed from a monitoring tool failing. The layers of dependency. It's kind of mind-boggling.
It really is. We're talking core stuff. Amazon Connect for call centers, Lambda for serverless computing, Config for managing resources, even their AI platform, Amazon Bedrock. They all rely in some way on DynamoDB.
So when the DNS couldn't find DynamoDB anymore.
Everything built on top just stalled. Ground to a halt, enterprise software, consumer apps, internal tools, everything. And it stayed that way for hours. It was a perfect, painful demonstration of how a single point of failure in this highly centralized system can cascade outwards and paralyze huge chunks of the modern economy.
And the cost.
Yeah.
The numbers thrown around were just astronomical. Potential losses in the hundreds of billions of dollars globally.
That estimate isn't pulled out of thin air. It's based on two main things. First, lost sales. Every online business, every e-commerce site relying on AWS infrastructure just stopped making money.
Yep.
Second, and maybe even bigger, is the cost of idle workers. Think about it. Millions of people in finance, logistics, communications, creative industries, suddenly their tools don't work. They're sitting at desks unable to do their jobs. That lost productivity, that opportunity cost across the globe, that's how you get to hundreds of billions very, very quickly from just a few hours of downtime.
And the really sobering part, as you mentioned earlier, this wasn't some black swan event, some total fluke. The sources point out this was the third major outage tied specifically to that U.S. East 1 cluster in just 5 years.
Right. That's what makes it so concerning. It's not an anomaly. It suggests a recurring vulnerability, maybe even an inherent fragility baked into the architecture of this critical internet infrastructure.
It really highlights the concentration risk, doesn't it? AWS controls something like 30% of the entire global cloud market.
Around that, yeah. A massive chunk. So when they sneeze, especially in their biggest region, almost the entire digital world catches a cold. Or in this case, full-blown pneumonia.
Let's just list a few examples to make it really concrete for people. Who got hit?
Oh, it was across the board. Finance apps, Venmo, Coinbase, Robinhood. Suddenly, you couldn't manage your money, even if the money itself was safe. It was inaccessible.
Travel chaos.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Delta, United Airlines, their systems went down. People couldn't check in. Flights got delayed. Total nightmare for travelers.
Basic communication.
Even that. AT&T and Verizon customers reported trouble sending texts or using certain services. Workplace tools like Slack and Zoom started malfunctioning. Imagine trying to run a remote company when that happens.
And even just relaxing at home.
Forget it. Hulu, HBO Max, Spotify went offline. Big online games like Fortnite were down.
And Amazon's own stuff must have been crippled too.
Completely. Their main e-commerce site, Prime Video streaming, Ring security cameras, Alexa smart speakers, all reliant on the cloud that just failed. And crucially, their internal logistics, warehouse systems, delivery routing, everything's seized up. That's a massive physical operation grinding to a halt because of a digital failure.
But I think the detail that really drives home the need for a non-digital alternative is the impact on public services.
That's a critical point. The New York MTA, the transit authority, had issues, and maybe even more alarmingly, the UK's tax agency, HM Revenue and Customs, their website became inaccessible.
Wow. So we're not just talking about buying shoes online or watching movies. We're talking about essential government functions, tax collection, public transit, all vulnerable to a single data center having a bad day in Virginia.
Exactly. That single event, with its potential multi-hundred-billion-dollar price tag and its paralysis of critical private and public infrastructure, well, it provides the undeniable dollars and cents justification for why governments are suddenly thinking, hang on, maybe we shouldn't put all our eggs in this one digital basket. It's the why behind preserving those non-digital options like cash.
Okay, so that AWS catastrophe really sets the stage. We've seen the immense risk of digital systems failing on a massive global scale. Now, let's pivot from that huge systemic view down to the individual level. How does that risk translate into why physical cash is still so important? It feels like we're moving from billions lost in the cloud to, well, the risk of someone being shut out entirely.
That's a perfect way to put it. The term that comes up is digital discrimination. It sounds strong, but when you look at the numbers, it's accurate. When we talk about keeping cash, yeah, backup is part of it, but the core argument, the one you can't really argue with, is inclusion.
Making sure everyone can participate.
Exactly. And the U.S. data alone is pretty stark. Our sources cite 5.9 million households in the U.S. are completely unbanked.
Meaning zero connection to a traditional bank. No checking, no savings.
None at all. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's another 18.7 million households classified as underbanked.
What does underbanked mean in practice?
It means they might technically have a bank account, maybe a basic one, but they still heavily rely on other, often much more expensive financial services. Things like check cashing stores, pawn shops, high-fee prepaid debit cards, money orders. They're sort of on the fringes of the formal banking system, often because of cost or lack of access or distrust.
So you add those two groups together, the unbanked and the underbanked. That's nearly 25 million households in the U.S. alone who face significant barriers to using digital-only payments.
It's a huge number. So when a store or a service says, sorry, we're cashless, they're not just making an efficiency choice. They are, intentionally or not, putting up a no-entry sign for millions of people.
And it's not just those formally defined groups, is it? There's a wider reliance on cash.
Right. The data shows about 13% of Americans still use cash for all or most of their daily purchases. And this group isn't random. It skews heavily towards seniors, who might be less comfortable with tech or worried about digital privacy. It includes low-income earners who might not meet minimum balance requirements or face overdraft fees they can't afford. And it disproportionately affects minority communities, who've often faced historical barriers and discrimination in accessing banking services.
So a cashless policy hits the most vulnerable hardest. It stops being about convenience and starts becoming a serious equity issue.
Absolutely. And there's another angle, too, linked to financial discipline. One of the points advocates for cash make is how good it is for budgeting.
Because you can physically see and feel the money.
Exactly. The Retail New Zealand chief executive called it a great tool for managing money, especially if your budget is tight. There's a psychological difference, isn't there? Handing over a physical $20 bill registers differently in your brain than just tapping a piece of plastic or your phone.
Yeah, you feel the loss more tangibly.
Right. That friction makes you think twice about impulse buys. It helps enforce spending limits. Digital payments are designed to be frictionless, which is great for speed, but can make it way too easy to overspend or slide into debt without realizing it.
And this isn't just a U.S. phenomenon. You mentioned New Zealand. We see similar patterns there.
Definitely. The sources note that in lower socioeconomic areas in New Zealand, cash use is still quite high. And there's a key driver for this: banks closing local branches.
Ah, right.
Yeah.
The banks pull out to save costs.
Leaving entire communities without easy access to banking services. If you live in a small town or a poorer neighborhood and the last bank branch closed and maybe you don't have reliable internet or easy transport to get to the next town, where do you get cash? Or deposit it?
The local shop, the corner store.
Exactly. The local dairy, as they call them in NZ. These small business owners suddenly become the unofficial, unpaid bank tellers for their community. People rely on them for small cash-out transactions just to get by.
So the local shop is picking up the slack left by the banks closing branches. That highlights another function of cash, doesn't it? It fills the gaps when the formal systems retreat or fail.
It absolutely does, which brings us right back to that resilience argument we started with. Cash isn't just about inclusion day to day. It is, without a doubt, king in an emergency.
When the power goes out, when the internet's down.
Precisely. The AWS outage was a digital infrastructure failure. But think about local disasters, hurricanes, ice storms, earthquakes, wildfires. They often knock out power and communications infrastructure.
Right.
In those situations, cash is described as critically important because it works completely offline. It doesn't need electricity. It doesn't need an internet connection. It doesn't need those EFT POS terminals, the card readers, to function.
EFT POS, that's a common term in places like NZ in Australia for the standard card payment terminal, right?
Exactly. Electronic funds transfer at point of sale. If there's no power or the cell network is down, that EFT POS machine is just a plastic brick. Your credit card, your debit card, your phone payment app, they're all useless. The transaction can't be verified. The money can't move.
And we saw this play out in real life, didn't we? The Texas winter storm back in 2021.
A brutal, perfect example. Massive storm hits, grid collapses, widespread, long-lasting power outages. Internet infrastructure goes down with it. What happened on the ground?
People needed essentials: food, water, maybe fuel if they could find it.
And the only businesses that could actually stay open and sell those essentials were the ones that could still take cash. If a store was digital only, they were closed. If you had thousands in your bank account but no power to charge your phone and the store's terminal couldn't connect, that digital money was effectively worthless for buying a bottle of water or a can of beans.
Wow. Physical cash was the only thing that worked.
It was the only lifeline for commerce in that situation. So you see, the argument for cash goes way beyond just, oh, some people prefer it. It's about ensuring the economy can still function at a basic level. It's about making sure the most vulnerable aren't completely cut off. And it's about having a guaranteed fallback for when, not if, those complex digital systems fail, whether it's a massive cloud outage or a local power cut.
Okay, so given these vulnerabilities we've talked about, the big systemic digital failures like AWS, and this problem of digital exclusion hitting millions, it's pretty natural that policymakers are starting to react.
Yeah, it leads directly into political action.
Yeah.
We're seeing this real pushback now against businesses going completely cashless. There are active debates, legislative efforts in both the U.S. and New Zealand trying to force businesses to keep accepting cash.
The argument in the U.S. often centers on that core idea of legal tender. Senator Fetterman's quote in our sources really sums it up neatly.
What did he say?
Something like, it's simple, it's legal tender. If you accept money, you have to accept all money. It's a very direct sort of common sense argument. If the government issues this currency and says it's good for all debts, then why can a shop refuse it?
Exactly. And there's a proposed federal law reflecting that. It aims to require pretty much all physical brick-and-mortar stores across the U.S. to accept cash, U.S. currency, and there'd be penalties if they didn't.
Are there exceptions?
Yeah, some common sense ones, like maybe online-only businesses or places with super high security needs, like certain federal facilities. But for your average retail store, restaurant, coffee shop, the idea is they'd have to take cash.
And this isn't just theoretical, right? Some places are already doing this.
Correct. It's already happening at the local level. Big cities like Philadelphia, San Francisco, New York City, they've already passed laws banning cashless-only retail stores. So there's precedent. It shows it's politically possible in diverse places.
And we see a similar push down in New Zealand.
We do. The NZ First Party introduced something called the Cash Transactions Protection Bill. It's slightly different, maybe a bit more pragmatic in its approach.
Oh.
It doesn't say businesses must accept cash for absolutely everything. Instead, it sets a threshold. It would require businesses to accept cash for any purchase up to $500.
Ah, interesting. Why $500? What's the thinking there?
Well, $500 is enough to cover most everyday essential purchases, right? Groceries, petrol, a meal out, maybe a doctor's copay. It guarantees that people can use cash for the necessities of life.
But it acknowledges that for really big-ticket items, a new TV, maybe car repairs people, usually prefer digital payments anyway for the record-keeping and security.
Exactly. It tries to strike a balance, ensure access for daily needs while recognizing cash isn't typically used for massive purchases anymore. It's about safeguarding that essential everyday commerce.
Okay, that makes sense. But, and this is a big but, if governments mandate cash acceptance, they're essentially telling businesses how to operate. We have to look at this from the retailer side too, right? Especially small businesses. They must have strong reasons for wanting to go cashless.
They absolutely do, and it's crucial to understand their perspective for a balanced view. The biggest argument, pushed by groups like Retail New Zealand, is simply that fewer and fewer people are actually using cash.
The numbers are dropping.
Dramatically. For many businesses, cash payments have fallen to less than 10% of all their transactions. So from their point of view, why maintain a whole separate system, training staff, handling cash, security procedures, bank runs for such a tiny fraction of their business? It seems inefficient.
And then there's the security risk. That has to be huge for small shops.
Massive. Holding physical cash on premises makes you a target for robbery, plain and simple. Business owners worry about the safety of their staff and themselves. Plus, there's the issue of counterfeit notes. It's getting harder to spot fakes, and if a small shop accepts a counterfeit $50 or $100 bill, that's just a direct loss. They eat that cost entirely. Going cashless eliminates those risks.
And just the day-to-day hassle, the admin burden.
That came up strongly, especially from those dairy owners in New Zealand we mentioned. They talked about a lot of admin, counting the cash, balancing the till, storing it securely overnight, physically taking it to the bank, which might be miles away now if the local branch closed. It all takes time and effort.
And they're not getting paid extra for it, especially not for providing those cash-out services that the banks used to handle.
Exactly. That's a key point of friction. They feel like they're doing the bank's job, providing a community service by giving cash out, but they bear all the admin costs and risks and get nothing in return, while the banks save money by closing branches. It feels unfair.
So if we mandate cash acceptance everywhere, Aren't we basically forcing these small businesses who are already operating on thin margins to subsidize the failures of the banking system to serve communities? That seems problematic.
That is the absolute crux of the tension. It's a direct conflict. Do you prioritize the operational efficiency, cost savings, and physical security of the individual business? Or do you prioritize the broader societal goals of financial inclusion and systemic resilience?
It's a tough balancing act.
It really is. Any policy solution has to grapple with that trade-off. Maybe there are ways, subsidies for cash handling, better support infrastructure, but the fundamental conflict between business burden and social need is right there.
Okay, let's flip the coin again. What about the cost of the digital alternative? Businesses complain about cash handling, but card payments aren't free either, are they? We hear about swipe fees all the time.
Swipe fees or interchange fees are a huge deal, especially for businesses with tight margins like retail and restaurants. Every single time a customer pays with a credit or debit card, the business has to pay a percentage of that sale back to the card issuer, the bank, and the payment network.
And it's not trivial. What kind of percentages are we talking?
It varies, but typically somewhere between 1.5% and maybe up to 3.5% of the total transaction value.
Okay, 3.5% might not sound like a lot, but on a low-margin item.
It can wipe out the profit entirely.
Yeah.
Let's take your example of a $10 meal at a small restaurant. Maybe their actual profit margin is only 5%, so they make 50 cents profit if someone pays cash.
Right.
If the customer pays by card and the swipe fee is 3.5%, that's 35 cents straight off the top. Suddenly, the restaurant's profit on that meal is slashed down to just 15 cents. That's a 70% reduction in their profit just from the payment method. Multiply that across thousands of transactions, it's a massive cost.
That really puts the cost of digital convenience into perspective for the business owner. And it's not just the per transaction fee, is it? There's the cost of the technology itself.
Right, especially with the newer contactless systems, like PayWave is a common name for it, the terminals, the software, the network connections.
Yeah.
Retailers in NZ mentioned this specifically. They said the costs for setting up and maintaining this contactless infrastructure could be really substantial.
How substantial?
One source mentioned some larger retailers facing annual bills up to $80,000 just for the privilege of accepting contactless payments and covering those associated fees.
$80,000. Wow. Okay. So if they're facing those kinds of costs and maybe they're banned from passing that cost directly to the consumer as a surcharge?
Then what happens? They argued that prices would inevitably have to go up across the board for everyone. So the cost of digital convenience gets hidden, baked into the price of everything you buy, rather than being transparent.
So it's not a simple case of cash is costly, digital is cheap. Digital has significant costs too. They're just distributed differently, often hitting the retailer's bottom line or being passed on implicitly to all consumers.
Precisely. This section really shows there are no easy answers. You're weighing business security and efficiency against social inclusion and resilience, and layered on top of that is this constant friction and cost from the digital payment processing system itself. It's a complex economic knot.
We've talked about resilience, the system not breaking. We've talked about inclusion, making sure everyone can participate. But there's a third big pillar in the argument for keeping cash, and it feels maybe even more fundamental, more philosophical. It's about privacy, control, and individual freedom.
Yeah, this gets to the heart of it for many people. It's framed as this ongoing battle between cash, which offers anonymity, and the digital world, which inherently involves surveillance.
Surveillance is a strong word, but is it accurate?
Well, think about it. Every time you use a card or a payment app or even a bank transfer,
Right.
what happens? That transaction is recorded. It's logged. It includes who you paid, how much, when, and often precisely where you were when you made the payment, thanks to geolocation data.
So a digital trail is created with every single purchase.
An incredibly detailed digital trail. Over time, this builds up a massive profile about you, your spending habits, your travel patterns, where you eat, what you read, who you associate with based on shared payments, even potentially your political leanings or health concerns based on donations or pharmacy visits.
And that data isn't just sitting there, is it?
Absolutely not. It's incredibly valuable. Big tech companies, financial institutions, data brokers, they collect, aggregate, analyze, and monetize this data. They use it to target ads at you, to assess your credit risk, to influence your future behavior. In essence, you lose a degree of control over your own information, and the narrative of your life starts being shaped by algorithms you don't see or understand.
And this loss of control can feel quite immediate and personal too, right? The sources mentioned something. the guilt-tipping button.
Ah, yes. That's such a perfect everyday example of this subtle coercion and surveillance. Everyone's experienced this, right? You pay for a coffee or takeaway, they flip that tablet screen around.
And it presents you with these big pre-selected tip options, 20%, 25%, 30%, often with the person who just served you standing right there watching you choose.
Exactly. And maybe the option for no tip or a custom amount is hidden or requires extra clicks. The whole interface is designed psychologically to nudge you towards a higher amount, partly by leveraging that social pressure, that slight awkwardness of doing it right in front of them.
You're making a financial decision under direct observation, influenced by the digital interface itself, rather than just privately deciding what you feel is appropriate.
Precisely. It's a small example, but it shows how digital systems can erode that private space around financial decisions. And that's where cash offers a stark contrast.
Complete anonymity.
Total privacy. If you pay with cash, there's no digital record, no tracking of your location or purchase, no algorithm adding it to your profile, no monthly statement detailing every single place you spent money. It's just a transaction between you and the merchant. Finished.
So the argument becomes, if we lose cash entirely, we lose that last zone of financial privacy. We become completely dependent on these big institutions, banks, payment processors who not only track everything, but also charge us fees for the privilege.
And potentially have the power to control our access to our own money. That's where the phrase economic liberty comes in, which proponents use to describe cash.
What do they mean by liberty in this context? Autonomy.
Exactly. Autonomy. If your entire financial life exists only within digital centralized systems, your ability to transact, to spend your own money, can theoretically be switched off instantly.
Switched off how? By a technical failure like AWS.
That's one way, as we saw. But it could also be a policy decision. A bank could freeze your account if their algorithms flag your activity as suspicious, rightly or wrongly. Or, in more extreme scenarios, governments could potentially leverage centralized digital finance systems to exert pressure or control on individuals or groups whose activities they disapprove of.
We've seen concerns about that globally, haven't we? The idea of financial censorship or control facilitated by digital-only money.
Yes, those concerns are definitely part of the debate. Cash provides a fundamental escape hatch. It guarantees that every citizen retains at least one way to pay for things that cannot be remotely monitored, blocked, or controlled by any third party, whether it's a corporation or the state. It maintains a degree of decentralized power in the financial system, right down to the individual level.
That really elevates the argument beyond just convenience or even inclusion. It touches on fundamental rights and control over one's own economic life. And there was another point in the sources, too, that using cash actually changes how people spend.
Yeah, this links back to the budgeting point we made earlier. Studies have apparently shown that people tend to be more careful, more thoughtful, less impulsive when they're spending physical cash.
That's psychological friction again. Seeing the bills leave your hand makes the spending feel more real.
Exactly. It creates a stronger sense of loss or cost compared to just tapping a card or clicking buy now. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing for the consumer.
So?
It can help prevent overspending. It can discourage racking up debt on credit cards for non-essential purchases. Digital payments are often designed for speed and ease, which is great sometimes, but can also facilitate impulse buys. Cash, by its very nature, encourages a moment of reflection, a bit more financial discipline.
Okay, so when you layer all these arguments together, the privacy protection, the defense against centralized control or censorship, the promotion of more mindful spending, on top of the inclusion and resilience factors we already discussed, the case for keeping cash mandatory, at least for everyday transactions, starts to look pretty compelling, doesn't it?
It becomes less about resisting technology and more about ensuring that technology serves human needs broadly, including the need for privacy, autonomy, and a safety net, rather than just optimizing for corporate efficiency or data collection. It's about maintaining a crucial counterbalance.
So given all these complex pressures, the push towards digital, the risks involved, the need for inclusion and resilience, it's really interesting to see how some governments are trying to actively manage this transition rather than just letting it happen haphazardly. New Zealand seems to be a good case study here, particularly the role of their central bank.
Yes, the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, the RBNZ. What's notable is how clearly they define their role in this. They explicitly call themselves the steward of money and cash.
Steward. That implies active responsibility, not just observation.
Exactly. They see it as a core part of their mandate to ensure that cash remains a viable option for all New Zealanders. Not just that it exists, but that people can actually access it, use it where they need to, and deposit it if they receive it. They're trying to manage the decline in its use without letting the whole infrastructure collapse.
And they're not just guessing about what's happening. They're actively collecting data to guide this stewardship.
Very actively. And they've recognized how fast things are changing. Payment habits can shift really quickly these days, and the risk is that certain groups could get left behind before policymakers even notice there's a problem.
So what did they change?
They made a key decision about their main survey on cash use. They used to do it every 2 years. Now they're doing it annually.
Every single year.
Yeah.
That allows them to get a much more current picture, right? To spot trends or problems much earlier.
Precisely. It gives them near real-time data to feed into their policy thinking, so they can potentially intervene or adjust course before access issues become a full-blown crisis for parts of the population.
And what kind of information are they trying to gather in this annual survey? It must go beyond just, do you use cash? Yes, no.
Oh, much deeper. It's a pretty detailed random postal survey. Of course, they ask the basics. What are your preferred payment methods? How often do you actually use cash? They need that baseline.
But what else? What tells them about the health of the cash system?
They ask really specific questions about access, like how easy or difficult is it for you to deposit coins and notes? How easy is it to withdraw them?
So that directly addresses the bank branch closure issue we talked about earlier. They're trying to measure the real-world difficulty people face in just getting or banking physical money, especially maybe in rural areas or for older people.
Exactly. That data feeds directly into the policy debate about things like whether local shops need support or if mandatory acceptance rules are needed because formal banking access is shrinking.
And they also asked about storing cash at home.
Yes, which gets at those resilience and privacy motivations. They ask if people store cash, but crucially, they also ask why.
Why? Okay, so are people hoarding it because they don't trust banks?
Mm-hmm.
Or for privacy? Or is it genuinely their emergency fund for when the power goes out?
Right. Understanding the why behind cash storage helps the RBNZ gauge its importance as a safety net, as a privacy tool, or simply as a necessity for the unbanked. It tells them about the different roles cash is playing beyond just daily transactions.
And you mentioned they added a new question recently.
Yes, and this one feels particularly proactive. They started asking specifically if people are facing challenges when trying to use cash.
Challenges like?
Like being told by a shop, sorry, we don't take cash, or finding there's nowhere convenient to deposit a pile of coins they've accumulated, or perhaps struggling to get the right denominations they need.
So they're actively trying to identify the specific pain points, the moments where the system is failing for users.
It seems so. It suggests they're not waiting for complaints to pile up. They're proactively seeking out evidence of friction or exclusion in the system, specifically from the user's perspective. That feels like real stewardship in action.
It's kind of ironic, isn't it? They're putting all this effort into monitoring and managing a system whose actual transactional use is, as we discussed, quite low now, under 10% of payments.
It is low transactionally, yes. But, and this is a fascinating statistic from the sources, despite that low usage rate for day-to-day buying, as of mid-2024, there was still something like $9 billion worth of New Zealand coins and notes just floating around in circulation.
$9 billion. That's a huge amount of physical currency still out there.
It really is. And that number tells you something important. Cash might not be the main way people pay anymore, but it clearly hasn't disappeared. It's still serving vital functions, maybe as that store of value, that privacy buffer, that emergency backup. That $9 billion represents a significant, tangible chunk of the nation's monetary landscape.
And the RBNZ's job as steward is to make sure that $9 billion remains functional, accessible, and useful, both for the people who rely on it daily and for the whole country if or when a major crisis hits.
That seems to be exactly their perspective. They appear to understand that a truly modern, resilient financial system probably needs to be a hybrid system. You need the speed and efficiency of digital, yes. But you also absolutely need the redundancy, the universal accessibility, and the privacy that only physical cash can provide. The challenge isn't about killing cash. It's about carefully managing its ongoing role as that essential counterbalance to an increasingly digital world. Hashtag outage on it.
So we've covered a lot of ground today. We started with a a technical failure in a Virginia data center, the AWS outage, that cost potentially hundreds of billions and paralyzed global commerce for hours. And we ended up talking about why a $500 cash acceptance limit in New Zealand might be crucial policy. It seems disconnected, but the link we've uncovered is powerful, isn't it?
Absolutely undeniable. That extreme fragility of our digital infrastructure, quantified in those massive losses, provides perhaps the strongest possible argument for why we need to maintain cash. Not just as a backup, but as a parallel system offering resilience and, crucially, inclusion for millions worldwide.
The sources really lay out this fundamental trade-off we're making as a society, don't they?
They really do. On one side, you've got the incredible convenience, the speed, the efficiency of digital payments, that seamless, frictionless future we're always promised.
Has to go. Easy.
Yeah. Right. But on the other side of the scale, you have to weigh these very real, very significant risks. The risk of catastrophic failure due to centralization, like we saw with AWS, the undeniable social cost of excluding the unbanked and underbanked, and this deeper loss of individual privacy and potentially economic control.
So preserving cash isn't really about being anti-technology.
Not at all. It's more about diversifying our monetary infrastructure. It's like having insurance. You hope you don't need it, but you'd be foolish not to have it, given the known risks. Cash is like insurance against digital catastrophe, whether that catastrophe is technical or social.
It's about ensuring the future of finance works for everyone, safely and fairly. Which leaves us with the big question, really. How much are we willing to give up for that digital convenience? How much privacy? How much control? How much resilience against failure?
Yeah. Where do we draw the line? What's the acceptable price for frictionless payments?
And that leads right into our final thought for you, the listener, to maybe chew on. If the digital systems do fail again, and the evidence suggests they will, whether it's another massive outage locking down finance and travel, or just the slow, steady exclusion of more and more people from being able to buy basic goods.
When that happens, what form of money will actually still work? What will be the only dependable way to transact? And what kind of event, what tipping point will finally force us collectively to decide what legal tender truly has to mean in the 21st century? What functions must it absolutely guarantee for everyone?
Something to think about. We'll leave there for this deep dive. Until next time, keep digging.
Thanks for listening to the Cash News Podcast. We hope you found this episode insightful. Don't forget to like and review us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter, and be sure to visit us at thecashnews.com to stay up to date with the latest on the world of cash. Thanks again for listening to the Cash News Podcast.